Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call to order the Cabarrus County Board of Commissioners retreat. We're in a different setting today, but it's still an informal retreat. So, if you feel that you need to get up and kind of move around while you're listening, of course, that's what we usually do because we're not quite as formal. I hope you enjoy your nice, cushy seats. I'm glad to have mine. So, I'm just going to turn it over to Mike Downs and let him kind of go over this. Usually at our retreat, the county manager and staff tend to lead us through each of the areas that we're going to talk about. So, Mike, it's up to you.
All right, thank you. Welcome everybody to your 2014 retreat. We did change locations. However, this is a casual get up, move around, more of casual conversation for the most part. Just to go through the agenda real quick. We'll turn it back to Chairman Poole here in a second, but we're going to start off with a presentation on the demographics of the region. Professor John Chesser from UNCC is going to talk with us. Sort of the ones that were here last year are familiar with his topics, and it's going to bring us an update on those and give us some forecast in the future as to what some of those mean. Then we're going to break for dinner. We'll eat here in the room. Won't conduct any business during that time, so it'll give you an opportunity to talk to each other and talk to whoever else is in the audience and that type of thing. Then we're going to come back afterwards and start talking about, just as we did last year, Commissioner Osterreich, you didn't, this is more for you than them. It's because what we're doing is we've got on boards, we've got every core function, every department all the way through that we do programs and services. So we're going to give you an opportunity. We've got all of the department heads or one of their representatives here. You were sent out brief descriptions or synopsis of what they do. So if you have any questions, if you want any clarity on any of that, they're here to answer your questions. If there's something that even is not on the sheet that you don't understand, if it's just something else that you heard somewhere and you got some questions, they're here at your disposal to answer your questions. And then what we're going to do with the boards will be up, and you'll each have an opportunity with a set of dots to go up and put. If it's something that you truly support and want to continue, then you'll put a dot beside it. If you're not quite sure that you want to continue or you just know that you don't, then there won't be a dot there. So just like last year. And then after that exercise is over, what we'll do is sort of look at it and see if there's some up there that don't have 3 or more dots and then we'll talk about those and see if there's any more questions about that. Again, the department heads will be here again throughout that period, so you'll have plenty of opportunities to talk to them and to us as well. Then we'll break after that for the evening. We'll go home, get some good rest, and be back here first thing in the morning. 8 o'clock breakfast, 8 to 8:30, continental breakfast, so don't eat at home. Come here and enjoy some of the food here, and then also have another opportunity to socialize again with you guys. And then we'll start the morning off with our tax assessor. Brent Wiesner will be here to sort of give us the status of tax collections, what his forecast, what he's experiencing this year in growth, what he's projecting for next year, and then that sets us up for the following session after that, when Ann Wilson and Parth will be coming in and talking about the status of the county financially right now. What are we doing? How are our revenues coming in? How are we annualizing those revenues, and where we think we're going to be at the end of the year? Again, it's going to be a guesstimate of what we think we are just by annualizing where we are so far this year. So it'll give us a pretty good picture, give you a pretty good picture of where we're at, where we expect to be. And then we'll talk about some different options. We'll start talking about the 5-year plan, our 5-year financial forecast. And remember that, again, those are just snapshots of where we are currently and where we are currently when we created those. So there'll be some different scenarios for you guys to consider. It may be that in the end, we don't use any of those. It's something totally different or a modified version of one of those, but it gives you an opportunity to know what's coming down the pike. You know what the needs are, and then how we pay for those needs or not. And that's so tonight, as we're setting it up, it's going to be a gradual progression all the way through lunch tomorrow. And then at the end, We'll talk about those 4 plans, give you plenty of time to have conversation, and then we'll break, and then the schools are going to come in, and you guys, it'll be very similar to your regular meetings. You're just going to address those 3 issues, those 3 agenda items that were brought to you last month. It'll give you an opportunity to continue that discussion. Once that's over, then you will have, there'll be a wrap-up session, and it'll be anything goes. Whatever you guys want to talk about, whether it's something we had already talked about through here, whether it's the 5-year plans again, or if it's something we haven't even talked about and you just want to make sure. And finally, we're going to ask, I'm sorry, I forgot. After the financial plan tomorrow, before lunch, we're going to talk a little bit about the community survey. We do those every 2 years, or we have in the past, and really it's an opportunity for us, you, to get some feedback from the public, whether it's on the programs, whether it's our parks, whether it's our libraries, whether it's how we distribute information or make information available to the public on what you guys do and how you transpire your business and that type of thing. So we're going to have an opportunity to look at the rough draft. If there's anything you want to change, delete, add at that time, then Kasha will be available to talk with you and go through why it's designed the way it is and what we hope to see out of that. So, and again, in the end, wrap-up session, and then we will, hopefully during that time, we will ask you, I'm sure you'll be willing to give us a little direction as we start going through. We'll talk a little more on the budget tomorrow morning, but remember, this is the beginning of the process for you guys. So now we're going to be looking for some direction. We've been working on it for 3 months, getting ready up to this point, but now it's time for you guys to give us some input before we continue on. And we start meeting with the department heads in a couple weeks, actually next week. I think that's right. So with that, that's the game plan. Again, it's casual. If you want to interject somewhere in between, I'm not being rude, but I'm going to try to keep you on schedule as much as possible. And then at the end, we'll have that wrap-up time, and we'll go forever if you want. So, okay? All right, good. So I'll turn it back over to you.
You're such a comedian today.
We got plenty of time
Go
tomorrow,
forever,
right?
yeah.
We don't have to be back here till 8 o'clock Monday morning for real work, so we're good to go, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll we might all just leave you here, let you turn the lights out tomorrow,
Okay.
which is perfectly fine. So, but yeah, it's not like normally in here. I try to call on everybody and give everybody a chance to speak. If you have a question in the middle, then just key up. I mean if we have a break scheduled, and you need a break, take a break. If you think we all need to take a break, wait for somebody to take a breath, and then if we're kind of getting towards the end, then we can break early if we need to or something like that. I mean, it's a little bit more flexible, and hopefully, I know it will be for all of us, a whole lot of interesting information, because staff's been working really hard to get it out to us. And so we're going to start off with John. We're glad to have you here. You came out and have talked to us before. I think things have changed a little bit in the region, and but you've got a lot of demographics and good information for us, and I think a lot of people will be interested in it. So welcome. Do you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Glad to be back here. It's always nice for me. So I can get this going here. My name is John Chester. I work at UNC Charlotte, one of the outreach units there, called the UNC Charlotte Urban Institute. We've been around for about 40 years, and I've been around a shockingly large percentage of that time. I'll be with the university about 25 years this May. The Urban Institute is, there are 2 other similar groups at NC State and Chapel Hill, and we are designed to do a lot of work with the community in our service area for the university. And my background is in urban and regional analysis, and so I really like this sort of thing, so you might be able to tell that once I get started. But I have an agenda that's very similar to what we did last year. I've added a couple things. And while some things haven't changed dramatically, the world has changed somewhat. I was going to give you some feedback on what I see changing in what's happening demographically for the region, for the county, and what I can how much clearer my crystal ball may be than it was last year about this year. Looking ahead, it gets a little clearer every year as you get closer to it, but you never really get clarity. You just get a little bit further. The fog is just a little bit closer every time you get a year further down. Please stop me and ask me questions along the way. You guys had lots of interesting questions and comments last time. What I start with you guys last year, and just want to kind of do a reprise of that for you, is how much population growth that you've already experienced. This is not news to you, but just to put some numbers on it to let you know where Charlotte has stood in growth as a region, the Charlotte Metropolitan Statistical Area. That just means a certain group of counties around Charlotte that mostly are connected to Charlotte through things like commuter patterns. So the Census Bureau creates these metropolitan statistical areas, and then they use those for a lot of the data that you hear about in the news. Well, for Charlotte, we have been in the top 10 in population growth. When I say Charlotte, I mean the region. The Charlotte region has been the top 10 in population growth since 2000. So that's a lot of growth that we've experienced, and Cabarrus County has certainly done it. I show these usually to just put that in perspective. If you're not a geographer, which I am, you may not know that this is Cabarrus County, but there you are. You mostly probably do know that. A group that worked with us for several years put these maps together based on satellite imagery. So the things that you see there are what was considered developed land versus natural undeveloped land, the light and the dark green, based on satellite data from 1976. So I'm just going to run through what's happened to us as a region at the points in time that this study was done. So here's what happened between the first two time periods. And the little pie chart here starts showing the percentage of coverage of developed land among all that large set of acreage. Okay, so hold on, because something really big happens between the mid-'80s and the mid-'90s. And you can really start to see the way the pattern is, the level of concentration of the pattern, how dense it is and where it's denser. And certainly it's denser in the entire western half of Cabarrus County than it was. This is the last actual picture I have of the footprint change based on satellite imagery. But if you just go backwards one, you still see another dramatic 96 to 2006. And I think you'll notice that Cabarrus County sees a large percentage. If you go back with me just a little, you'll notice, look at that pie chart, how much it's gone forward from the mid-'80s. So 2, 4, 14, 22%. And this is really queuing us up right up to the point sometime before the recession hit. The next one is an estimate. So it did happen at the time of the recession, but this gives you some idea of the scope of the development change that we've seen. The conversion rate, of 133 acres per day across this region is fairly dramatic if you think about it from that perspective. And that gives you the picture of like parcel by parcel almost. Really, the story is at that very granular level, because the region as a whole has grown, but it's not grown, as you can see, uniformly. And there are definitely very hot spots of growth across the state, which you see up here, with the darker shades being the higher growth counties. And then here, if you break it down, you see that it's really very specific parts of the region that have really had the largest growth, either in percentage or in real numbers. Most people don't think of Indian Trail as in the top 10 fastest growing cities during the 2000s. Indian Trail there wasn't much there in 2000. There was an awful lot more there by 2010. You see that, I would say, the Harrisburg area in Cabarrus County had a similarly strong, dramatic change during that same period, along with North Mac, and then some of the whole swath of that Union County edge to Mecklenburg. The other thing that some of the numbers specifically put you at for that decade over 35% growth rate, very strong growth. Union County, which was 60+% growth rate, that put Union County in the top numbers for the entire country for the decade in population growth. So Union County was one of the fastest growing counties in the entire country, but at half of that rate, I think you guys felt that you had plenty here. Also, some big changes that I mentioned last time I was here, that for the entire time I've lived in this area a lot of my life, Gastonia was always the second largest town to Charlotte for decade after decade. And in this, the 2010 census put Concord in that position. And it put it well ahead of Gastonia. So you're closing in on 80,000 or more, I'm sure by now, or above that now. But you see that puts you now, my prediction is that the next challenger to Gastonia is going to be places like Huntersville, where which we're expecting a lot of growth because they have a lot of potential for growth there as well. Here you see Harrisburg shooting up also dramatically in the regional town rankings for population. So again, very specific areas have been growing. You see there's a widespread area of general growth, but so the real steep growth is concentrated in some relatively specific areas. Another picture for you. This gives you, excuse me, census tract level growth rates over that same decade. Here's where the census tract level growth, the darkest color was 100% growth at the tract level. And you see the pattern is fairly clear. There's a real northern and southern center of growth for the metropolitan region, and you guys see that it's a big chunk of that area within Cabarrus County, and there it is just sharpened up. So 100% growth in a lot of these census tracts over the decade. And then one more view of where it's happened. It doesn't take many of these red dots from where each one equals 100 people to have really created the booms, and you can see them in very specific areas, and you can see that there are no real concentrations of those kinds of growth in a lot of the other counties in the area. A little bit about the way that the way that your growth itself affects the demographics within your county that I think is of interest to you. You've heard a lot about the aging of the population, and that's been in the news a lot. We are all getting older, but the country as a whole has been aging. This shows you the national age breakdown by percentages in 1960. So in 1960, the largest segment here were those under 18. And by 2010, you can see that the profile is very different. So the country's changed a lot. The over 65 age has moved up, and the median age has moved from under 30 to well into the mid-40s. So the country as a whole has changed, but the aging change is just as specific in many ways as the population growth numbers. Some new information I brought I didn't have this last year. This shows, for a little bit more of a statewide, regional perspective on some of these figures. This is the percentage of the population that's 65 or older back in, I believe that first one is 1990. So 1990, 2000, and then you see a big change in the latest estimates, which just came out, the 2012 estimates, the 2012 ACS data. What's interesting about this is you've got some of the highest growth areas in the state, here and here. This has a different component to it. But some of the highest growth areas have some of the lower populations of population 65 and older. There's a lot of different reasons for that. This gives you the median age by county, and you can see the pattern is sort of three tiers. You've got the youngest county in the center, lots of families, lots of young people, lots of foreign immigrants comparatively in Mecklenburg County, all of which are making that demographic younger, putting Mecklenburg County in one of the younger demographic groups in the country as a county. This shows, if you can see this, there really are three tiers. There's the youngest Mecklenburg County, where there's been high growth rates among a lot of groups of people who tend to have kids, and a lot of groups of people have moved here who have kids and who are younger. And so a lot of them have landed in Mecklenburg County. The next group, there's a tier of counties that you guys are right in the middle of. And you guys that puts you, as of this date, right at the median age of the country. So 37 was the median age approximately for the whole country, and you guys are right at the median. So whereas the median means there are about as many people, there are as many people older as younger, you guys have a median age that's very similar to the national profile. Now, you'll notice that there's another very clustered group of counties that have been not experiencing as much growth. A lot of the in-migration that you've experienced has been one of the reasons why you're younger age demographic. So while Mecklenburg is younger than many counties nationally, you guys, places like Cabarrus County, which are in suburban areas that have also had fairly high growth, are also lower than the rural counties in median age. And the rural counties are aging in the aggregate the fastest. Now, I don't know if that's, I'm not going to say as I get older and older, it looks less and less of a problem to be an older person, from my own personal perspective. But there are a lot of things that affect government, like government services, that are affected by both the very young and the very old population in particular. But being a younger MSA overall and being at the median age here in Cabarrus counties, the growth itself means that there's another angle to this. So while you have a younger median age, you have a higher growth, and so that means that your actual total number of persons age 65 and older is large. And you see how much it means for I was talking about how demographically young Mecklenburg's profile is. That doesn't mean that's not a lot of people in that age category. So sort of the same thing applies to you guys. You have a substantial number, and the growth in actual numbers of persons 65 and older is substantial. So you've got some counties where there's a much older demographic, so the percentage of persons that are older is larger, even though the total numbers are not as high because they are not as large. So with this aging comes a lot of the household changes that you also hear a lot about, and all of these things affect a lot of the growth and development patterns that you're going to see, that you've seen, and that you'll be seeing. I really love this slide. It's from the National Association of Realtors, and if you know the cleavers here, that would be your 1950s very standard family sort of unit. And notice that the way they cleverly did this graphic, that was over 40% of households back in 1950, and look at how much reduced it is nationally by 2008. So this is obviously a very important kind of change to realtors and developers, because it means that the very same kind of housing that perhaps we've always built and that we've always sold in the world of development may not really suit everybody exactly the same way. So you've got a lot of groups that are definitely going to be interested in possibly a different type of development. And to go along with that same analysis that they did, they see in the next 15 or so years from now an oversupply of large lot detached homes in the aggregate for the country, and an undersupply of other types of homes. So that is interesting because it does show up in even trends that we're beginning to see now locally here in Cabarrus County and regionally in the kinds of experience people are having with development trends.
Just to ask, if you go back.
Sure.
Just to make sure I understand. Attached would be apartments, condominiums, is that what you mean?
For the housing types that the realtors are associated, they're talking about things like townhomes, attached. Usually that's
what
the
I mean.
sort of thing.
Yeah, townhome, or could it be apartment complexes?
This is typically
Or is this
for
just
sales.
homes?
This
For
is-
sale homes,
yeah,
okay.
I believe for this particular slide, yes.
Okay, and then small lot, do you know what is that quarter acre lots, or do you
Or
know?
smaller.
Or smaller.
Mhm.
Do you know what the large lot size is?
Large lots tend to be, I don't know exactly what they were using for this, but it would tend to be larger than a quarter acre.
Okay, so
Generally.
quarter acre tends to be the,
That's what a lot of.
roughly the dividing.
That has been my
'Cause I think
experience.
some of
I'm not a
our-
Realtor. There may be a Realtor here that's actually better
yeah.
qualified.
Oh, I have a real estate license, but I'm not a Realtor, that's why, but that's why I was just kind of making sure for some clarification. And for our zoning purposes in the county, are we not mostly, or Jonathan, 4 to the acre, or?
That's, we have very.
No,
little-
we're worse
we-
than that. I mean,
yeah,
sorry.
our-
We're bigger than
our-
that in the county. I didn't know
Our minimum
what
lot
was-
sizes are much larger than that, but if you look at all the jurisdictions together, then you do start to see with a movement in Kannapolis, Concord, Harrisburg in particular, to lots of quarter acre or less.
Movement to having the
Yeah, so
smaller lots.
it proves out exactly what this is saying, is that there's a movement in the market to those smaller lots.
And I'll just jump ahead and mention, too, that what we're seeing in talking with people in different places in the metro area is that some of the activity they saw, especially last year, was on previously approved developments coming back and asking planning boards and commissioners and town boards, can we redo this with smaller lots and more houses?
Which
That's
is-
some of the experience. I don't know if you're seeing that here as much now.
That just
but-
means more density, which is what we've been kind of chasing or running from, I guess, during all this growth. Because, I mean, that speaks to why there's certain areas of the county where those dots were higher, because you have a whole bunch that, developments go in and they're smaller lot sizes, and we've gone from some rural areas to being, the more condensed or more dense areas and everything
And
else, so.
I think important to say in this case, too, is that from the Realtor's perspective, they see this as the market, and that this is not anything anyone's trying to, this is what they're seeing a demand on the demand side for.
Yeah, that's showing that's saying that if you were a developer,
What would you, what
What
do we
should you
need?
do in this-
What could you sell?
yeah, it's looking that you don't need to have larger acreage, though, that's kind of a premium to have larger acreage versus the smaller, having an
People would-
older home that has a little bit more land. I mean, my husband complains all the time when he has to mow the yard, so
Sure.
I don't have to do that anymore, but, and so you find that a lot of people want smaller
And-
lots
And I think what you're seeing is, I think there's going to be a real diversity in what people want, and different places are going to find niches in different market segments, and that's always the way it's been. I think this is more in the aggregate that you're going to see, I guess I would say, a lot more diversity in demand than we've maybe seen. Whereas a lot of developers, I think, have tended to, they know what works, they know what sells, and they would stick with that. But I think what you're seeing now is a lot of developers now seeing people are sort of like pioneers, have done some different kinds of things and been real successful, and now you're starting to see a lot of other developers trying that.
Hey, John, on your previous slide, you have tremendous growth between other families and all other households. And what was the difference between those two categories?
Oh, okay. You've got down here, you've got, I'm sorry, my color's a little washed out. The blue is married, no kids. This color is other families, and this is, green is all other households.
Yeah, what's the difference between those last two categories?
Those two, I'd have to say, I don't know the exact all other households, but with married, no kids, that's pretty self-explanatory. Other families would be like single parent, or like an older parent living with a child. And so you've got family members in the same household that are not mother, father. There would be different configurations of that.
So green is like roommates and things like that, or just
Yeah, people are,
cohabitants?
yeah, other households.
Yep.
Right. So just to kind of go through, summarize from here, you obviously have more people. They're older, and of course I'll say wiser people. And then the next thing I wanted to just touch in on was education. And this is not, when you typically are talking about this, I think you're probably talking about people you are helping fund to educate. I'm talking about the educational level of the people who are here, not, if that makes sense, which is a very important way to think about it. Not quite the same. This is a national map that the Census Bureau did of the percentage of people who've completed a bachelor's degree in the 25 and older category. These darkest, I know this is a small map, and so I will zoom in of the southeast, but you can see this darkest green color, and this is Mecklenburg County, and then you have Wake, Orange, and Durham counties. Those are the only counties in the two Carolinas that have 40 or more % of the adult population with a bachelor's degree or higher. Here's a zoom in on the Southeast. What's happening nationally, this is something that we see everywhere, is this map, if you looked at this map from prior years, the level of concentration of college-educated people was not nearly so high. There's been a concentrating trend. So more counties, the larger number of counties have a smaller percentage, and a few counties have a much higher percentage of college-educated population. The way that works out here in North Carolina, this is just another way of looking at some of the same data. I just mapped this at above and below the state average, which I will point out that because Mecklenburg and Wake County are now both approaching 1 million people, which is closing in on something like 20% of the population, those two counties move the needle themselves on some of these statistics. But what was surprising to me when I looked at this, and I actually looked at the South Carolina counties as well, so York and Lancaster, in the Charlotte region, only Union County, so Mecklenburg there, not only one of the younger counties nationally, one of the more educated counties nationally, only Union County was above the state average in this region of college-educated population at the time that these data were taken. So that's, to me, a very interesting and important thing to consider. It's who's living here now, and it's changed fairly rapidly in places like Union County because it's grown so fast and because of the people who've moved into that county. So it has made a big difference. And so now Union County is at least above the state average of college population, college-age population. But it's the only one in the region that is. But Mecklenburg, again, is at a completely different level than most of the rest of the country.
But now, I'm sorry if you can go
That's
back.
right.
The darker green ones, and even,
Just these one, yes.
yeah, those, and even down at Wilmington.
Mhm.
I mean, and then the next tier, you look up, I presume that's Appalachian.
Mm-hmm. There's Watauga.
Asheville is, UNC
Mhm.
Asheville's over here.
Those are above the state
Right,
average.
so some of those track because you have a university there.
Mm-hmm.
My comment would be UNCC is on this side of Mecklenburg County.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I would kind of hope that would have influenced our county
Some
more
of-
so than maybe Union County, and maybe it does, but that was what stuck out to me was obviously in the Raleigh, Orange, Durham County, you've got all of, you know,
Mhm.
those
Traditionally
schools.
really strong.
Yeah, those seem to be areas where you would have more degrees because you have a lot of college employees.
This has had a
that
very
might help,
strong
so.
in migration of retirees into this area who have had the means to retire somewhere that they like, and so that's another thing that you see in that's affecting this group. Here's the education, just a different take on bachelor's degree or higher. These are different classes based on the map that was set up by the Census Bureau, but this shows you at a state level that back in 1990, you still had Orange County, where Chapel Hill is, as the top at that point. As you go through time, big change in 2000, and you see the two fastest growing counties besides Mecklenburg in this region and the entire Triangle area move up dramatically. And then when you go to the 2012 data, you see that you've moved, that Cabarrus and Catawba and Iredell and have moved into that a slightly higher category. These are all different categories but gives you a different perspective on where college-educated population is kind of clustered. You see Greenville, I believe that's Greenville and Spartanburg, York and Cabarrus, Iredell and Catawba in the same general category. What I'm going to show you in a few minutes is income, and what is really amazing is how closely the median income matches this slide. That was sort of getting to my bigger point about what this all means. And here's just some specifics on where things look rank-wise for North Carolina counties. And you see, here's North Carolina and then Cabarrus County just below that. So again, North Carolina slightly below the average for the country, But you can see that these counties, and this is just a completely different category as you move up that high. It's a real big difference. And now you see some of the more rural counties in the state, what a dramatic difference that you have as you move into the more rural areas. And this is an issue with the whole state. You see a real correlation with the education levels and the income levels. So just to kind of reprise what I said there, we've got the MSA's really respectable education levels really reflect those extremely high numbers of people with college educations in Mecklenburg County. So again, I added this income from the last time we talked because it is a really interesting picture, because some of the latest data also reflect the setbacks we've all experienced as a result of the recession. Here's the median household income in 1990. So you see the pattern with York County, Union County, and Mecklenburg. Move up to a real positive kind of a change by 2000. This is median income. The estimates again, and here you've got these two strongest counties in many respects and some of the other demographics showing a real close it's very close to the education level slide.
All right, before you go off that one,
Mhm.
so that one has, are we between 45 and 55? Would that be our
I believe that's correct.
color? And then can you go back one to the 2000? So
Yeah.
in 2000, we were more like 55 to 75.
Yeah. And this reflects,
And that,
this is what I told you about reflecting
Right.
the setback that we've all
so I don't, that's hard, it's even hard for me to read, and I'm
Yeah.
kind of close to it, that's why I was kind of
Sorry,
pointing
that's
that
a
out.
bit-
No, that's okay. I was trying to point out just what the ranges were to show that our ranges, we've dropped down to the different ones, so, thank you.
So, big wave of growth. Natural aging plus the population growth means that you do have a substantial growth in your elderly population, 65 and older population, I'll say. You're moving in a positive direction in education levels but still under the state average. And the incomes, obviously, we've been setback, everybody's seen the setbacks from the recession that we hopefully are moving away from now. Just a little bit of time on some future growth, some projections, and some forecasting, we'll say. I like to show this slide just to remind you guys where you are in this target zone. I centered it on the middle of Charlotte, and this is 10, 15, and 20-mile rings. I'll also point out that really big correlation with a lot of growth that happened at different points has been the outer belt completion. And the outer belt runs very close to this 10-mile ring here, but notice it runs really further in on the west just because of the way things have developed from Charlotte. So we've seen now, this is the last leg being completed now. Here you guys are. So here's that belt, here's and I'm sure if any of you commute, you're very well aware of the big infrastructure improvements along the highways here. One thing I was going to also, I mentioned before, but we've got another year of data, I believe, since the last time we got together. Overall, what's happening with population growth since 2010? Nationally, there's been a phenomenon that in many metros, which are like Charlotte is a little bit more like the larger metros in the country than Raleigh is in some ways. So, and Charlotte has fit more in this national profile, is that we've seen the center county have the highest population growth in the last 2 years that we're getting ready to get a third year of that to see whether that's going to hold. That is a very dramatic change from previous years. If you think about how many years I was mentioning that here Union County was the fastest growing in both the Carolinas percentage-wise. Well, Mecklenburg is faster growing than Union in the first 2 years of estimates since the census. And you see you guys fall in that same general category. Now, it's been sort of odd times, and there's been so many things that have been different. People aren't really sure there's so many things sifting out. It's not clear to people in general who prognosticate about this. Exactly how long this trend holds, what does it say? Is it really new? Is it just a temporary thing? So it is interesting that it's gone on now for 2 years. So we talked about this a little bit before. There are two general schools of thought on this. We've got, I've got a quote here that shows this growing demand for smaller homes and walkable communities that are convenient to amenities and services. This is a planner who's been quoted as seeing this, and he represents a lot of opinions of people that see this sort of thing occurring. Well, when you're seeing that occurring, and it's happening where you are, and it may be happening here in Concord as well, you see that trend and you experience that trend. Well, the other side of that is, wait a minute, the future growth is going to be suburban. It's going to look like much more like it has looked, and a lot of people really want those larger lot subdivision type things that we were saying the realtors are worried may not be as high demand. My take on this is that what we're going to see is, again, that diversity of demand. I think that there's going to be some of both, and it's going to be a matter of where you are in the market locally with what's happening in your metro area, what's happening in your county and your cities. And I think we're going to see all of it. It's just going to be a more diverse group of development types than we've seen before. When they're calling something, I live in Davidson, when they call something an apartment building a Euro-style apartment building, multi-story with street fronts above in Davidson, and I think the same sort of things are happening in towns all around the region. That's definitely new, and that's a market segment we really didn't have before. So some part of that's going to be that. How much of that is the question? Exactly what the form of the housing takes, there's still a pretty strong belief that the people are going to be here in some form of housing. And so here you've got Cabarrus County. Let me trace that for you. I believe it's here. All right. So here's Cabarrus County moving up in parallel with Union County. So this is Cabarrus County. Here's Gaston County trailing below by about 2020 to 2025, where Cabarrus County would actually exceed Gaston County's overall population. This is from the state office that does this sort of demographic projection. And they're not wild-eyed people generally in the kinds of projections they make. This is their projection from last year, and this is still relatively similar to what people are expecting. So you're looking at a lot more people. Here's the 200,000 line here. And this is something that Forbes puts together based on tax return information. So domestic migration is what this shows, but it shows a really interesting picture, and it's worth a look. It's on the link to it at the bottom there. It's something, like I said, that Forbes does. You can click on any county in the country and see for the year that you're looking at what the main counties that you send more people to than in the main counties that send people to you. So the net difference. So you've got two different Southern California counties. One that sends you more than come here than go there, and then the next one over is the opposite. And if you look back over time, and in this particular thing you can go back, you see the difference. The blues are coming in, the oranges are leaving. That's a natural thing, it happens. As you look at 07, 08, as we built up to where the recession hit, we were really getting domestic in-migration in Cabarrus County that was really strong. And again, you're looking at who are those people, and that has changed the whole demographic profile in counties that have had consistent years of strong growth. For instance, in Union County, if multiple years of higher income, higher educated population move into your county year after year, it changes the profile of your whole county. And that's the sort of, and when I showed you, it's the age profile as well. So you get younger people, a lot of times are moving in, and again, you get people who are more footloose, and that tends to be younger people. So the in-migration tends to bring your average age down a little bit. Eventually, increases your school population somewhat. But that's the picture back when this was done. This was available. So if you're interested in that, you can look and see any county in the country and what the activity is. And here's the last two decades stacked up on states, on people coming to the country, two states, who's gaining population, and who's the destination states and the sending states. So where are people leaving and where are they headed? And you see where we stand here as a state. And it's a smaller chunk in the 2000s than it was in the 90s, but it's still right there at the top of the list of states receiving more people. And the question, I guess, for you guys is Cabarrus County going to, what's the profile going to be for the people who choose to come to Cabarrus County? It looks like a lot of people are going to do that. So some permanent information from the end of 2013 we just saw. So this is updated information for you. Looking at the last 2 years, this is as of the 17th of January in 2014. Sorry, this should be 2014. They've seen an 80% jump in permits in Mecklenburg County. And the quote from the article in Mecklenburg Times from just a few weeks ago, in Cabarrus site of several new and planned developments, and it talks about the number of permits issued, and that being up 36% from the previous year and 71% from 2011's counts. So extremely strong permit growth here. This was a quote I love from the previous year. Hotspots that they were calling out, they're calling it the racetrack area of Cabarrus is the area they're calling out. This was also just released. This is the building this is your hotspots update. It's a little washed out here. I haven't seen it. Sorry. This is Cabarrus County. This is 2013 permits. 2013 permits are right about in line with 2012 in Union County. So Union counties have shot up more, but I'm not really sure how much you want to emulate that level of increased activity. One of the things that's one of the real kind of pullouts, Lancaster County's Panhandle has, and remember I talked about hot spots. That one relatively small area of Lancaster County, you see here is the difference in permits. Here you barely see the bars on permits issued the last previous years to 2010. And look what happens in 2013. It's just one area and not very many separate different subdivisions. That's all it took to shift that much development at Lancaster County. And they are going to be one of the faster growing. They actually, they're really giving some other counties a run for their money that don't expect them to be a contender in that kind of, if you're competitive about that sort of thing. But Lancaster is one of the ones, I generally predicted last year you'd see a lot of activity north and south metro, and I was including that racetrack, Cabarrus area there. What's really happened, we've got, it's spread out. We've got subdivisions over 1,000 units have been announced in a couple places in Gaston and in Lincoln. And so you're seeing a lot of activity. This is all positive for the housing construction market, and it's speaking to that style of development still being in demand that is the single-family detached. But one of the reasons that so much of development is happening in Mecklenburg County is because they've got multifamily, townhouse, and attached homes, and a lot of people in apartments have been booming. This is from, I believe, last year. But this is, so take that in consideration. These are last year numbers. This is the residential units that were approved and remaining by jurisdiction. So within the Cabarrus County jurisdiction, within the town of Concord, Harrisburg, Kannapolis, et cetera. So the sum of units remaining, I've got a table here. Again, this was as of the beginning of last year. So there's been some movement on this, and I have to ask if Jonathan thinks there's a dramatic change. But you have somewhere, I'm guessing, in the neighborhood of 15 to 20,000 units remaining. That's places that are queued up and ready to go. And the thing I always like to show people is based on your own experience with single-family developments. This is something in the range of additional public school students you might expect to generate from, and these are units that are, I mean, ready to go. That would be, nothing really stopping anyone. This is all market now. What's the market going to ask for, and will it be built? And if it's built, what you can expect. And I can't tell you exactly when, but it's looking good that, those developments are happening, and a lot of those students will start appearing at a higher rate than you've probably been experiencing. Again, what we're seeing and hearing from people around the region are some developments that are coming back and adjusting. That was a trend that we saw last year. Definitely have seen over the course of the whole year a big, strong uptick in apartment development. And now we're seeing some of the originally laid out single-family residential projects going underway that were held up. I do travel Poplar Tent Road here in Cabarrus County most every day on my way home, and all of a sudden, whole new landscapes are emerging. That trees are disappearing, and so I see a lot of activity just myself as I drive back and forth through the edge of your county every day. I did mention this earlier, but the road projects are eventually going to end, they say. I have been lucky enough to live in the midst of a couple of these projects that didn't ever seem to want to end, but they will eventually end. This is I don't know, it's called the Vortex or something, Jonathan, or the Turbine. I think it's Vortex. I think that's that ride at the yeah. It looks, you kind of see that here with what this is a different design, but it does mean that both direct access into the University City and on into Mecklenburg County will be improved. And with the completion of 485, you'll also have more different directions that will be easier to live in Cabarrus and work somewhere else from. So I do think that is something that would be a growth pressure that you can expect to start. People do notice that who build homes, and they start trying to figure out how to fill that need that they see. So you guys have a lot of potential growth market niches that you can fill. You only have to see and walk around in Concord to see what a charming place it is and what potential it has and is already experiencing in development and redevelopment. You've also got other centers like Annapolis and Harrisburg that are also they have a lot of different forms of walkable kinds of potential, and you guys actually have multifamily. Union County doesn't do as much zoning for multifamily, and so that's another market area that you guys will see as that is strong. You'll see that here, and again, all those approved residential subdivision lots, and now the move back into that market by people who do that sort of work, plus the rapidly improving highway connections as these things wrap up, and the large and continuing strong University City location. And I will add to that now that there's a lot of ground being moved around to bring light rail to the edge of Cabarrus County in the Lynx Blue Line extension, which is, we're starting to see a lot of activity with that growing. So don't have the update for 2013, and I'm not sure what the difference is, but here you see the dip in Cabarrus County, single family and multifamily, and then the movement. I believe we're going to start to see a stronger movement in a positive direction, probably already in 13. I'm sorry I didn't have time to pull those updated figures in for you, but I did show you that regional comparison, which did show it's strong. And
if that included our 2013 numbers, would that not be a lot sharper upward
I believe-
dramatically?
And that one graph I showed you from the Mecklenburg Times, they had compiled it across all your jurisdictions. And so, yes, you guys are seeing, I believe, a strong, and again, the jurisdictions, all those permits that are issued in Concord and Annapolis. And this is some of the things we talked about briefly last time. I'm just going to kind of reprise that for you. Here's your tax base breakdown from 2012. 68% residential. Here's how some towns that really, well, for instance, like I said, these towns would not be happy or not happy with that residential property percentage. It's very high. And that means the breakdown, basically, the more residential, the bigger the wedge in residential, the tougher it is on your finances as a county or a city, whatever the jurisdiction. Pineville, you have to put up with Carolina Place Mall, but there's not a lot. That's a very large percentage of Pineville, and so that's the reason that you see such a small. That's an unusual kind of town set up. Here are some cities in Union County back in 2006. Again, that's a very high percentage in Union County. You guys, what I think you said you were 68%. This is what Union County would really like your numbers, I believe, on that.
Is there any data that kind of shows the sweet spot where,
It's funny you should say
industrial,
that because
commercial, residential?
Here's the
balance?
I do have this down here, which so for every $1 that Union County receives from residential development, they provide on average about $1.31 in services. So $1 commercial, they spend, you see, about 45 cents, and $1 of forest or farmland, they spend about 11 cents in services. So when you start looking at those numbers and you start trying to figure it out, Pineville is an unusual situation to have such a low percentage in residential. Most people are definitely trying to go for, that they want to get that residential lower. Typically, you guys are in better shape than a lot of places are with that. But as you look at your finances, they would be better if that pie was cut a little different.
I just didn't know if there was statistically, some, like I said, some perfect mix where instead of like that $1 to $1.31, obviously we all know that it costs more to provide services to a residence than it does to commercial or to industrial or farmland, because they just don't need the services.
I guess the reason that's kind of a hard question to answer is if you've got a stable population and you've got a 68% residential, that might work pretty well. But in a growing population like you've got, which means you've got a lot of capital expenses being sort of thrown at you by things like school growth, it really may not work as well. So I don't know that there's a sweet spot unless you can figure out, for a growing county, there might be one, and it also depends on your tax rates.
Yeah. Well, I know that, there's certain areas that we have zoned for industrial property and commercial property, and I talked to some folks out in that part of the county who said, we got a lot of farms still out here, and we really would like to have more growth, but then, I like having farms, and the rural feel too. I don't want everything to be built up. I don't want us to look quite so bad like Mecklenburg County with everything built. So I didn't know if there was, but it makes sense to me that with the growth, my concern would be is if you look at a tax base, the growth in housing costs you more. Mm-hmm. And, you don't want to build a house right next to something, a big industrial plant that's going to have other issues or, to move in. But I know the planning and zoning folks look really hard on kind of where things are located. So I didn't know if there was
there's another angle to this too. Because I mentioned Union County tends to have vast majority single-family detached. It's a different calculation for different types of housing.
Well, there's a certain dollar amount.
There's a lot of
remember Jonathan, if you remember, there's a certain dollar amount. If it's over $250,000 value, you do better, of course, than if it's.
Well, I'm also talking about residential styles, like the density means that there's a different expenditure. So,
Okay.
so for instance, if you did the Euro-style apartment building or condo building over shops, like they're doing in some towns now, that building itself is really a whole different kind of calculation than what you're talking about for a single family that's really in most people's mind is what that residential unit will usually look like.
Okay.
So you can have different kinds of residential that can have a real different kind of tax impact.
When we're looking at the $1.31 versus the 45 cents, that doesn't take into account jobs provided or anything of that nature.
It's really, the expenditure is sort of like per, so it's a pretty straightforward calculation. It's like we've got this much in services that we are having to spend
Right.
for each one of these kind of units.
Okay, thank you.
John, do you take into consideration income taxes in those calculations? Because, for instance, with the schools, we pay for the schools partly with our property tax, but then we get money back from the state and the federal government, which comes from a lot of income tax. And so, how do you correlate
Well,
income tax value?
this is the total cost, regardless of the source of the revenue for the jurisdiction. So for Union County, they spend, if they look at everything they spend and you just divide it up, it's like that. It's like, what do we spend? It's a different question. Where are all those revenue sources exactly coming from?
I guess my only comment is, so potentially you could have people that come in, like you were talking about, younger people are more educated, and so potentially they're making more money, move into a $200,000 house, but they provide taxes in different ways in terms of income tax that's not captured in that analysis. Is that right?
You're right, and there's an even more complicated things. They're also likely to use or not use services differently that then also fund tax collection within the county differently. So, for instance, the demographic of people that you attract or who live in your county are going to have different patterns of spending, which may or may not contribute or not contribute more or less revenue to the county that they're getting the services from. So if you think about what meals are eaten, where, what kind of services you purchase, whether those services are taxed, and what jurisdiction gets the revenue from those taxes, it's a complicated thing. But generally, your higher educated, higher income people are spending more money. They may be spending them where they work, and that may not be in your county, but they are likely spending some of it in your county, and they're more likely to spend more if they're a different demographic, like a higher educated, higher income demographic. Is that, yeah. So there's a lot of different things generating this, but this is really just in terms of, if we look at what we spend for each kind of. Now, some of this stuff, I'm running towards the end of my time, but I just want to show you what I've seen, which I think is interesting about where home values are, what home values are emerging in what areas within the region. So just to explain this map, this is at the census tract level, and I did some maps that looked at what percentage of homes were valued in different ranges across several different categories of housing types. So if you look at, this is the lowest, I aggregated this up, so the lower range of homes, so the percent of homes valued somewhere between 50 and 100,000. So that's a very low-cost home. You see some in this very center part of Charlotte, but then you see a very big gap of any homes in that lower price range in this area that we kept showing all the high growth in. I'm just going to go through several price ranges. Each one goes up. So as you go up, you see a shift in where those home values are predominantly existing, or where they show. So the darker the color, the higher the percentage of homes in that area that hit this 1 to 150 basically range. So here you start really seeing a pattern of much more of your middle class housing, the 150 to 199 range, and you see you guys are really strong. You see different belts of that. As you move here, again, you see this belt here that has these higher homes. Now the percentage may be a large percentage, but there may not be as many homes built in some of these areas. So this isn't indicating how many homes are built. What really indicates the population is these smaller zones have more, indicate more people are there. As you move up the value, I just thought it was interesting to see where the larger percentage of the higher priced homes are. And here you see, if you're familiar with Charlotte, this is sort of down the middle of Providence Road coming from the middle of town. You've got Fort Mill area, Belmont. You've got the edge of the lake and all of North Meck, South Iredell. And then you've got this whole swath of here. And then you've got the Marvin, Waxhaw, Weddington area here. And it really shrinks up like water drying up in a pond as you get into the really high. But this is really being to show you where your market sort of has been. And then we go to the million or more and just have a few places around Lake Norman in the middle of the Eastover area, and then right down there at the edge of Union County. But that's to give you a little bit of a picture of where you're kind of where your markets have been, not where they necessarily will be, but what kind of residential home developments you see pattern-wise. And just to kind of sum up for you, I'll just kind of give you that sort of warming. It takes just the one hot spot to really catapult your whole jurisdiction into a much higher rate of growth. I will also say that that growth does not ever occur in a spread out, convenient pattern for service provision. And you see that time and again. And schools are where you get a lot of that in the news lately. The people are where the people are, and that's not necessarily where the school buildings are. And as you get more and more developed, it's often in places that it's harder and harder to site and pay for a school site as things get more crowded. So that's the way it works, and it's the same thing for fire and police and all other kinds of government services. And I think what I've talked about before is you've got to be careful and understand that many things are kind of happening without any real coordination. So, for instance, if a town approves a large subdivision, they don't really have to come to you guys and say it. When those kids show up in school, it comes back in, and it's the same, works the same way for a lot of jurisdictions. It hits counties in particular because that's the way things work. And if you have a jurisdiction that has for instance, lost industrial customers and has water service that they really would like to be getting revenue for, their incentive may be to get more residential development to sell those excess capacities. That may not be a really great situation for other jurisdictions who have to come in and do this. So those kinds of things happen a lot, and it tends to mean that the more coordinated you can be among jurisdictions, the more you can kind of each understand each other's incentives and issues. Maybe that's a help. So we've talked about it a little bit. I've already kind of gone through. I'm not giving you any new prognostications on where I think the growth patterns are coming back in what was basically predicted in some of those quotes I gave you. I do think that this racetrack area, as they call it in Cabarrus, is going to continue to be strong. And like I said, I think you're going to see a lot of interest with the infrastructure improvements in highways here. So, you're growing, aging, you've got to educate, you want to attract the right kind of people, and all of that affects the kind of services you're talking about. The raw number of people, the age of those people, how many young people need schools, and the more strategic you can be about that, the better. And I don't have a real great answer for that question. But I like to just throw it out there as something that would be really good if we could do more of that. That would make everybody's life, well, I would say it would make your lives easier. I don't know if it makes everybody's lives easier. So, I do think you guys are in an extremely enviable position in many ways, but I do think you've got a lot of growth potential coming at you that is going to be a challenge to deal with all those costs that are going to come along with that. I think that's about, yes. Thanks again for the opportunity to talk to you. I'll be happy to answer any questions I can.
I was going to say, there's one thing that you might be interested in, since this is your area. The Cabarrus County Schools has done a study about the growth patterns and school needs, and you might be interested in getting that to add to your
yes, I would.
Your data. I'm sure we have it. Yeah, the ORED study. We have it, or we can get the schools to.
Jonathan can email that to you.
Yeah, I just think that'd be something you might be
I would
interested in, because there are a lot of counties that would be thrilled to have the problems that we have with growth. We just have to figure out how to handle all of that, and we've had a bit of a lull, which has been kind of nice, but I think you're right that it's going to start up again, and we need to make sure we're planning for what's coming and not get caught with some of the issues. So, do you guys have any comments, questions? Go ahead, sorry. We're all back feeding.
We talked a little bit about the younger population growing, but also the elderly, the older population growing. John's helping our staff. We're in the process now of winding down a strategic plan for for aging strategic plan, and what are those impacts, and what does that mean? What kind of services are they expecting? When do they expect it? So we'll be bringing that to you into February, early March? Is that?
We'll be bringing it to you in February and March, and then on to the commissioners in March,
Okay.
April.
March, April. In time to make decisions for the budget, but it's interesting. John, can you, what do you think is the reason for the increase in the aging population?
Well, we are experiencing slowed birth rates, and one of the things that's happened is that we're seeing dramatic changes in foreign immigrant population patterns. There have been some studies that are showing that as many people are returning to Latin America in the last sort of wave of years as came in certain periods of time. We're not seeing birth rates that a foreign population tends to have higher birth rates because people move that distance. They don't tend to do it late in life. They tend to do it early in life. So they're younger people. They typically come and then have kids because that's the natural point in life that they are when they make those kind of changes. And we've seen a really big slowdown with the recession in immigration. We were aging as a country anyway because birth rates were low, and if you look at those population pyramids, the bulge that was the baby boomers are moving together mostly into old age together and moving up the averages and the numbers of people that are in the higher age brackets. There is the baby boomers' kids are coming along as another wave, but we are moving, as we move into retirement age, it is pushing new boundaries of older numbers of older people, at one time ever in the country.
So maybe you can't answer this, but the increase in that age bracket, is that from within, or is that coming to the region?
It's
from
both.
elsewhere?
It's both. We're seeing, I showed an internal migration. You saw people, whether they're moving from Michigan or Honduras, people, unless they're retirees, they tend to be moving, a lot of times they're moving when they're younger, before they've had a family or with a family. So as that, you saw how that had slowed, that trailed off. It trailed off in a lot of cases because of the recession. There was less migration than there's been in a long time. People were staying in place a lot more. When people stopped coming in from outside the country as much, it really it began to make the aging of the country move up again in pace. So we were aging slower than a lot of the rest of the world because a lot of people were moving here from other places in the world. And when that slowed down, our natural aging progression started moving up again. We weren't being diluted as much by younger people moving in. Again, as the economy picks up, we may see more in-migration, both from other places in the country and from outside the country again. But my opinion is that we've passed the big wave of migrants from places like Mexico, that their population is changing. They have not nearly as many young people. They're aging. There aren't as many people of age to move here. Their economy's in a different place. So those were a lot of those things that were very dramatic in the 90s and early 2000s were a thing that happened and may eventually be looked at as having really been over by now. I think we'll see more in migration, but I think those kinds of trends are slowing down. That means that we're not moving into the same category as some European countries where they're actually losing total population. They're actually going backwards. Places like Japan and Italy and some places around the world like that are actually beginning to see, because of more deaths than births, because of the aging, they're actually losing total numbers of people.
Are you guys seeing any movement now with just retirees? Typically, if we're North Carolina, they're moving to the coast or they're moving to the mountains, to the tourist areas. But now, I understand they're actually moving to some of the metropolitan areas.
They are. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons Lancaster County has grown so incredibly fast is the Del Webb community, Sun City, Carolina Lakes. It's a 55 and older active adult community. Lincoln County just was debating a very similar 55 and older county community. I can't remember. It was over 1,000 units. I don't remember how much over 1,000. So those kinds of communities, they bring typically well-educated, higher income people with them. And as a lot of times people are moving into those communities on the edge of places like Charlotte because their kids live and work here in the Charlotte metro area somewhere. And that's a pattern you see in Denver and Austin and Raleigh and those kind of places across the country. But you're right, and that means if you become a center for that sort of growth, it changes your profile a little bit, and may not be as much pressure on schools at first, but then you tend to bring in other growth with that, and then the amenities that come in with that growth bring more growth. So it doesn't always stay in that tight, age range. And there's some people who are not really sure how popular in general these 55 and older communities will always be. They may not be the kind of thing that everybody wants to do.
Do you know if we have any on the books?
We don't. That's one of the major issues that we're looking at with this plan for the aging population is housing opportunities, because there really are not a lot of housing opportunities. Particularly, we see some of the higher end, yes, it's being met by the market, and lower end there are programs for, but particularly in that moderate income, we're not seeing a lot of opportunities. So as people have to migrate from their own homes, their own single-family homes, or living with family members into some type of a congregate independent or a congregate care, we're really not seeing the market meet that yet. So we'll be, one of the recommendations or one of the things we'll be bringing to you is how do we, through policies, help with that, meeting that demand.
Cool. Anybody, anything else? Well, I appreciate you coming. I like looking at data. I don't have the time to pull it all together and not all the resources to know where to go get it. I don't Google as much as some of the younger generation does. So I really do appreciate you coming out, and I know that other commissioners do. And
Well, it's been my pleasure, and I wish you guys the best of luck with the rest of your retreat. And
Thank
I'm
you.
going to take my leave and hit the traffic.
have fun with that.
Okay, I will.
Maybe we've kept you long enough to miss a little
Maybe
bit
so,
of it.
I
I don't
think
know
so.
if we have or not. So, next thing we have is dinner. So if everybody just wants to stretch, and we'll see how close it is to getting ready, and we'll have dinner, and then we'll start back up about 6:30. Okay.